Welcome to the Live Up podcast, where we revisit and score the movies from our youth to see if they live up. I'm Jess Latterman.
And I'm Amanda Treat. Today's film taught us to blow off school, blow off work, blow off life's responsibilities anytime the weather forecast is 75 degrees and sunny. From 1986, it's Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Woohoo!
I watched this movie very early in the morning, and it actually made me late for work, so perfect.
That's actually really funny.
So Jess, this is our first ever review of a John Hughes movie. What inspired you to pick this?
Yeah, so this movie actually came to us recommended from a listener that thought we should take another look at this one. So Amy, who listens to the podcast, I appreciate your recommendation, and we watched it and we're reviewing it now. So Amy, I guess we're going to just dedicate this episode to you. I hope we have the same opinions. If not, please let us know. For all the other listeners out there, if you have a strong feelings about what movies should be discussed, we'd love to know them. So as far as my history with the movie, so I am glad it was picked for us, because I don't think I would have thought of this one, because I think we were slightly too young. We were like not quite teenagers yet.
Yeah.
So I remember watching this a lot on TV, and I remember thinking that Ferris Bueller was like the coolest guy in the world. I totally idolized him, and I remember loving it. And I just loved all the tricks he played to play hooky. And you and I are this funny sandwich generation of like, are we elder millennials? Are we young Gen X? Are we geriatric millennials? I don't know.
We're Generation Oregon Trail, and we can go into that definition at some point. But...
And I just kind of feel like, even though we were potentially just kids and tweens maybe watching this movie again, all those famous lines from this movie, like Bueller and Bueller, I feel like it got passed down to us like family heirlooms or something.
I feel like even when we were in college, people still had dorm wall posters with quotes from Ferris Bueller. It had an impact on our generation, whether we were old enough to watch it in the theaters or not.
True. I don't have a setting in my mind of when I sat down to watch this, but I definitely, it definitely made an impact. And maybe the impact is more than what my actual viewing time was for the movie. But yeah. So what about you?
I remember some parent picked this out and showed it to a group of us little girls at a birthday party. And it had to be one of those where the parents the parents had never seen it, but all the kids are talking about it. So, hey, show this to your kids. But we had to be like 8 years old. And this isn't a movie for 8-year-olds. I remember at this party, they had a make your own ice cream sundae setup going on in the kitchen, and being very excited about that, because, you get to put all of the Reese's Pieces onto the ice cream if
I feel like that would still be exciting for me right now.
Oh, yeah. And you get to control the whipped cream can, like lots of fun. But that when we all sat down to watch this movie, we actually got bored. And I remember we turned it off after the parade scene, which in hindsight is actually a good call, because I arguably would say that's where this movie peaks. Like it goes a little bit darker after the parade scene. We just weren't into it as 8-year-olds. And I don't think we were the target audience, frankly, even though somebody's parents thought we were. So that's my memory. The first time I saw it, thinking along with the group sitting there on the couch and on the floor with our ice cream sundaes, that this was a little boring.
Did you watch it since though? Like, did you watch it as a teenager or in college?
I mean, I've definitely seen it a couple of times, like appreciated it more as probably a teenager or a young adult. Now we're coming at it as full-fledged adults, and I think our views have changed again, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, we'll get into that. So for those who haven't seen it in a long time, just to catch you up for this classic movie, it's essentially about an entitled boy we all once loved, becomes a little shit. And in fact, he was always a little shit.
Yeah, he's just always been.
Always been a little shit. And it's also about a teenager named Ferris Bueller who uses the magic of landline phones to successfully play hooky from school. So that is also the plot. You have now been caught up, those Gen Xer millennials, of what this is. So
I will call out that this movie is in the Library of Congress as a culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant movie. So I mean,
I saw that you put that in the notes, and that like blew my mind.
Yeah. No, this is like a quintessential 80s movie.
That's true. That's true.
Whether it's good or not is a whole different discussion, but this did have a huge impact on so many people. Well, or did it though? Because I don't think anyone actually changed their view of the world based on watching this movie, but
They didn't like
people
gate
love
crash
to quote
parades.
it. Yeah. It's kind of, I feel like it's almost like Napoleon Dynamite, where the quotes have lived on further than the movie itself. And that when you go back to sit down and watch it, you're like, oh, yeah, I forgot about that part.
Right. It's not even the part. There are some things even when I rewatched it, and I should say I rewatched it with my kids, which may or may not have been a great idea. But again, just it keeps getting me that I watched this on television that was edited when I was younger. And then when I watched like the actual thing, it's like, oops. But I felt like a lot of those lines still landed as kind of iconic still to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, like he's got that line, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. Like that was
Yeah.
everywhere. People just love quoting that. But that said, I don't think anyone ever stopped and looked around based on that line. I think they just like to say it.
Just like to say it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it does belong in the Library of Congress as like a classic timepiece.
Yeah.
Perhaps. Yeah.
I bet there's worse ones in there.
Yeah. I don't think it was a bad movie. I mean, I know we're going to get into everything.
Oh, we're going to pick it apart because we love that.
I mean, maybe you think it's bad, but I still think there's some good things about it. But I actually started to think about it in the lens of this is a period piece, the way that people will literally watch movies about the 1920s.
Yeah, the technology is like watching a museum. It's such specific to 1986 and then like, nope, we don't have that anymore. And it's one of those like I don't want to call out that all John Hughes movies are like this, but if there had been mobile phones, so much of this movie wouldn't have happened. Just like Home Alone. Like if they'd had
I know.
a mobile phone in Home Alone, like yeah, just call them.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to talk about this before we get into the characters too much. I feel like the use of landlines and the lack of email and cell phones, I mean, that essentially is the plot right there. And for those who don't remember, it's everything. The principal is on the phone with who he thinks is Sloan, who's the girlfriend's father. But of course he's not. He's on the phone with Cameron, the friend. Like this would never happen in the age of cell phones.
No caller ID.
No caller ID. The sister at some point, Ferris Bueller's sister, who's really annoyed by him, is trying to get him in trouble by calling her mom. But hey kids born after 1995, when you called your mom at work and she wasn't there to answer, like that's it. Like there's no
I love the kids in the high school are using those giant payphones that
oh my god, yeah,
they're calling Ferris at home from a payphone in the school.
Oh, that's right.
And it seems so high tech at the time because it's not a Casio keyboard, but whatever he's got there with all his like coughing and like vomiting sounds queued up and he's hitting the buttons and you're just going, wow, this kid's really tech savvy, but he's very specifically tech savvy in 1986.
Totally. All the kids who skip, I'm going to call them kids or teens, they like rig up their answering machines to basically validate or verify the story of why they're playing hooky from school. And again, that is something that I had to do so much explaining for my kids. This is what an answering machine is. In the explaining, forgot to explain caller ID because they were like genuinely like, what is that machine? And like they didn't understand that the principal wouldn't know that he's not talking to the parent. Kids today or teenagers today, like they cannot wrap their minds around it.
Oh, I mean, he's complaining constantly about how his sister got the car, but he got the computer. And he's got to be coding in BASIC because there wasn't even Windows. There's no Microsoft back then. Like we're talking old school. And I remember when I was in 6th grade, that was the first time a teacher showed us what the internet was. And he asked us, like, who has an answering machine in their house, but knows that their parents are not home to answer the phone? And one kid raised his hand. And we used the computer to call the answering machine. And it blew all our minds. But this was after 1986. It must have been like 90, 91 when we saw the teacher do that. It was the beginning of the internet for us, but like, the technology is so different, so specific and completely obsolete now.
Yeah, obsolete. And it's hard. And because it drives so much of the plot, everything, even when they're trying to, at some point, Ferris Bueller and Cameron and his girlfriend Sloan are trying to get into a fancy restaurant and they pretend to be like the Sausage King of Chicago. And there's just no way for the maitre d' to verify it. And then they have, one of them calls from a landline.
In the other room.
in the other room. There's no way my kids understood that scene. I have to say that even I barely understood that scene. And then basically by calling from the other rooms just sort of verifies that Ferris is indeed the Sausage King of Chicago. And it's like, so everything, it drives all the plot. It's almost impossible to separate the 1986 technology from the
Oh,
plot. It's like impossible.
it's
And
so
that
old.
one, it made it a little tough for my kids to understand. Which is so sad. It made me feel so old. I will say, like, for schools these days, just for the parents out there, I mean, it is like a surveillance state practically. I get emails and calls, you get texts, it's a whole thing. I know that this is just a movie, but even for parents now rewatching this, like our age, it would blow your mind because there's no way you could, it just goes
It was
against
the 80s.
anything.
Nobody knew where their kids were back
Right.
then.
Nobody knew where their kids were. And like it's just totally different now. But I totally went on that tangent about phones. But we can get back to John Hughes now if we wanted to.
Sure. And how he writes all these movies with old school technology that
Yeah.
wouldn't actually ever happen now. So I do want to take a moment to talk about John Hughes because he was the screenwriter director in the 80s and did all those movies, 16 Candles and Pretty in Pink. He did Ferris Bueller here. He did The Breakfast Club, Weird Science. And then he went on to do things like Home Alone and a bunch of not so great movies as well. But, you know, we'll ignore those and just focus on these 1980s
Yeah. I mean, this
ones.
is quite a list. I mean, this is basically Gen X
Yeah.
right there. Yeah.
So he apparently wrote the script for Ferris Bueller in 4 days. And
Mhm.
as a amateur screenwriter, I am so jealous of that because it takes me like a year just to write the same amount. John Hughes' big thing was he was really annoyed at the movies that were being marketed for teens like coming into the 80s, and I don't know, it must have been like Porky's that really set him off or something, because he described it, he didn't like movies that were marketed to teens that basically were films for adults who wanted to oogle teenage girls in the shower. That was the quote I read.
I mean, that's pretty gross.
It's true though. I mean, like, they're not movies
Yeah.
about teenagers as people evolving into adulthood. They used to make all these movies where it was like teens doing stupid, sexy things and
Yeah.
like chaos ensues. And sure, that's like Animal House and all those kind of movies. But he wanted to do ones where like actual teenagers were speaking their mind and having problems, but you could feel like you related to them. And I, like, even to this day, like when I watch Home Alone, I feel like I'm not Kevin McAllister, but you're watching him get bullied by his brothers and his family's ticking him
Yeah. It's
off.
super
It's just like
relatable.
you feel for him. So John Hughes was really big into like giving the kids' point of view some airtime. So I got respect for that. He's not always perfect, and we're definitely going to get into some of the cringier scenes he's written in here, but overall, like, he's not trying to make a like gross perverted teenage comedy. In fact, this wasn't even supposed to be a comedy at all. This was originally written as a drama, like The Breakfast Club, and it was
Really?
only when they took it into editing and started chopping it down, and he was like, wait, this needs to be a comedy, and started editing it around to make it into a comedy.
Yeah.
But that's where you get all these deep thinking lines, or like Cameron having his freak out at the end, and it starts getting all philosophical. What do you want to do with your life? Like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, that's from a totally different movie.
That is so interesting. And it sort of makes sense now because it does have sort of a blend. I also just think of this movie, and again, we're maybe on like the younger side of Gen X, but to me, if Gen X was a movie, this is the movie. Or if it's not this movie, it's all the other John Hughes movies.
Yeah, it's like The Breakfast Club, and
yeah, it's very much representative of, I think, kind of the or at least the suburban white generation of Gen X. Yeah, like we kind of don't care. Whole just like disinterested kind of mentality of Gen X. Yeah, is right here. Yeah, but the one thing I did want to like quickly say, and I think we'll get into this, is like, there is an appeal of skipping school. I mean, I think there's still, I mean, and as an adult watching it now, who doesn't want to skip work on a beautiful day?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and this was the movie that we were all like, oh, you can just do that. Just pretend you're sick and no one's really going to push you that hard. Okay. Cool.
And I could do all these crazy things. And even my daughter, who, like, I think during one of the scenes where Sloane is sitting in the most boring class on the planet, Lily was like, she's 11. She's like, now I understand why they want to skip school. There's this vague general appeal of this is super boring and should be other fun happening. So I don't know. I think that's like
the school they go to does, in addition to being very boring, like the teachers are all extremely formal, crusty old white dudes. Like they're
That's
wearing suits and
very
ties.
crusty.
It
Yeah.
just seems so formal compared to what my experience at high school is. And I can't figure out if maybe school was treated a little bit more like grander back in the 80s, or if this movie just had no sense of what teachers actually dress like when they go to work.
All the adults are clueless in their own way. Like the portrayal of that generation, it's just the parents are just out to lunch and don't know anything, and they're old and crusty.
And oblivious. They're all
All
oblivious.
oblivious. Yeah. Oh my God. And the dad, could he be any more oblivious
And the
of,
mom. Yeah, they're
and the
just
mom?
constantly missing what's going on.
I guess in the 80s and 90s, if your dad isn't toxic, he's like oblivious as anything. Oh,
We'll talk about the parents in a little bit, but I love that they just do business. Like that's their jobs. Business. We work in business.
we work in business.
The
Like,
mom
and
keeps going
we
on
work
like
in
the
business.
Vermont
And
deal. You know about the Vermont deal. What do you like? Do you sell real estate? What are you doing?
what are you doing? So let's get into our lead character.
Let's talk about
Let's
Ferris.
talk about Ferris
First of
Bueller.
all, have you ever met anyone named Ferris? What kind of name is this?
Never met anyone named Ferris. Never.
There's
Are
a
we gonna
bunch
get
of
hate mail now from people named Ferris?
yeah, the
Because
lone Ferris.
is it a made up name? Like
Were you named after Ferris if you're sending us hate
it's
mail?
true. If you were born after 1986, apparently yes.
Yeah, no credit there.
So I love Matthew Broderick. I just do. I'm a fan. I think he's a good actor. I think he's so charming. He's so funny generally. And of course, because we've established that I like musical theater, he is a Broadway guy, which makes me like him even more as like an actor. And I kind of think he's great in this. I mean, I think Ferris Bueller is an entitled dick, but Matthew Broderick is like plays the role.
He's perfect for the part. The
Yeah.
part is very smarmy and
But I don't think he. Do you think that
narcissistic.
that was the intended part? Because this is where it's funny to me because my memory from when I was younger was I thought he was the coolest guy ever. But now as an adult, I'm like, what a prick.
Yeah. No, he came across way worse in my adult viewing of this than he did in my memory. He just is like gaslighting his friends, and he's just
Right?
such a I mean, the whole world revolves around him, and he's just being a jerk to so many people, really condescending to like the parking garage attendant.
I
And
know, so cringy.
yeah,
Yeah.
again, not knocking Matthew Broderick for that, but I don't think he's the cool dude we remember.
I don't think he is either. I mean, I think what made him cool was when he looked at the camera and talked to you and said some of those iconic lines, which still kind of landed. I mean, I could see it kind of landing with my kids in a way. They connected with him.
I like the breaking of the fourth wall and movies or TV shows that continue to do that. You
Yeah.
know, like The Office was known for that,
Right.
or Fleabag when she rolls her eyes at the camera. It's always you feel
Completely
like you're being
brilliant
pulled
show.
in, you're in on the joke. And
Yeah.
so he's doing that really well here. But yeah, just the way he's interacting with everybody else in his life, he's just kind of a jerk.
Kind of a jerk. And he's such a jerk to his best friend Cameron. I mean, I
Oh my
think
God.
again, my memory when I was younger was that Ferris was the cool guy and his friend Cameron was the stick in the mud, and Ferris is just making him have a good time. And isn't that great? But now I look at it and I'm like, Ferris Bueller, you are taking advantage of a chronically depressed person.
Well, and just right off the bat is like, I need Cameron's car. Like, I don't need
Right?
Cameron. He's making Cameron be the third wheel in his own vehicle or his father's vehicle. And, pick up my girlfriend. She gets to ride shotgun. You're like wedged in the tiny back seat. And it's just,
This is where it just doesn't land, I think, with another generation because my kids didn't like that. They're like, that's not cool. And
he stole a
we're like,
car and pressured his
if
friend.
right, like if your friends are trying to pressure you to do something, you don't have to do it. I think kids these days, they don't see it as cool. They see it as like, why is he
Bullying.
being a bully? Yeah.
Yeah. Ferris, stop bullying Cameron.
Stop bullying Cameron, even though you're like adorable Matthew Broderick.
But that scene when they're in the kitchen, they're calling the school to try to get Sloane out and pretending that she's had a death in the family and they're on two different landlines. But like Cameron says the wrong thing, according to Ferris, and he full out kicks him. And the
Oh,
two of
that's
them are kind
right.
of like fighting in the kitchen, but like trying to keep it together while they're on the phone. And then after they hang up, Ferris gaslights him so bad, and it's just like, I didn't hit you. I didn't do that, but because that call didn't go well, I think we're gonna need to get your car. And
Oh,
it
that's right. And that's
just
just the it,
spins
yeah.
it. Oh God. He just came across as such a jerk in that whole scene.
When you're just saying it like that, it just resonated even more.
Oh yeah, it's just so manipulative. And then the other thing that jumped out at me, and it's like a big plot point in this movie, is for the amount of technology that Ferris has around him and the amount of things he's rigged up so that he can go have a day off from school. He's got like the family intercom recordings, and he's got his keyboard recordings, and he's got like
Yeah.
this whole machinery he's built in his room to make it look like there's a body in the bed that's moving and all this stuff. He doesn't know that you can't drive a car in reverse and make the odometer go backwards. There's so much that just hinges on that. And
Yeah.
like that's so basic compared to all the other stuff. He's doing all these elaborate things with technology and he doesn't know how an odometer works. I don't buy that. That hits.
I didn't buy that either, but I think it's part of why I think he's a jerk now because he didn't care, right? Like you
Maybe.
borrow you
Yeah.
you borrow your friend's thing and you kind of know you're never going to really put it back together with the odometer and you just don't care.
All these summaries of this movie where it's like Ferris, by saving Cameron from his bad family situation and encouraging him to, toughen up and stand up for himself, this is actually all very selfless. And Ferris
Yeah.
Bueller is really doing this all just for Cameron. And it's like, no, he's not. Your memory's doing that to you, maybe. Like he's gaslighting you. He just did it to get
Gaslighting
out
the
of
viewers.
school and use his friend's dad's cool car and do whatever the heck he wants.
Yeah, no, I know. It's sort of a trope, like the more outgoing friend with the wingman pushing his friend to do something. I was actually surprised watching this, like how much I didn't like Ferris Bueller, the character. Like,
He's so
ah,
smarmy and entitled, and I don't think we noticed it as kids, but as an adult, you're just like, I would hate that kid if he lived in my neighborhood or
right?
like if I were his teacher. Just like,
Right? I mean, there's a
oh, this
little bit of that
know-it-all
too.
brat.
Yeah, a little bit of a brat. I guess I feel almost like a little embarrassed that I loved him when I was younger. Like I thought he was so cool. Even as I was watching, I kept trying to like make excuses for him. Like I was like, well, maybe he's not so bad. Maybe I'm just overthinking this as an adult. And I'm like, no, he's just a jerk. I can't get
Yeah.
past it.
Ferris just being condescending to the parking attendant, but it's bordering on racist. Like
Totally is. He is
Y
bordering on
they
racist.
pull the Ferrari into the garage, and the attendant comes over, and Ferris just says to him, "Do you speak English? Do you speak English?"
I
And,
know.
like, the actor who's playing the attendant is actually, Richard Epson, who's randomly the drummer from Sonic Youth. Like
There's one other point where he's pretending to be the sausage king and they're trying to get into the lunch place. And they kind of like think the jig is up. Cameron and Sloan are like, all right, Ferris, the maitre d is not buying this. And Ferris is like, no, I'm not backing down. And it is such a weird dig your heels in thing. It just reeks of like every asshole you've ever seen lose their mind. I am so important. It just kind of reeked of that. And it just like,
yeah,
I
it just
didn't like it.
felt very entitled. I
So
always get my
entitled.
way no matter
I
what.
right? I am pretending to be a rich right white man, so I will get my way. All those little things, I really still at this point, I think as a kid thought he was like the coolest ever. I'm still embarrassed now that I thought he was so cool. So
All right, let's talk about some of the other characters
yeah,
around
let's
him
do that.
because some of them are great and some of them are useless and all sorts of things going on in this movie.
Yeah.
So
Who's
we
next? Who's
we
next?
talked about Cameron and his dad's 1961 Ferrari. He's the one in the movie who actually evolves and has a plot line going on with
Yeah.
himself. Like Ferris doesn't change at all. He's the same person at the beginning as he was at the end. You've
Yeah.
heard
True.
me complain about that with other characters in other movies. Like
Yes.
there's no evolution there. But Cameron does change, which
Yeah.
I think that makes him a little bit more interesting. And Cameron's played by Alan Ruck, who has been in a ton of things after this. He's on Spin
He's
City. He's in
great.
Succession
He's
right now.
great.
He was in the movie Speed, which I think is funny considering he was driving
Oh,
around in a
that's
Ferrari in
right.
this movie.
Oh my god, I totally forgot he was in Speed. But and he's depressed. I mean, part of me feels like if you redid this movie today, you would address that. I mean,
Oh
not
yeah.
that we have to make Debbie Downers out of our favorite 80s movies, but it just really stuck out to me that I was like, oh my God, he's like,
Yeah, no, he's
is
got
he
some
okay?
really bad family situation, and this is a total aside, but what the hell is that house? Like, they live in, like, a glass cube in the woods. It's so weird.
So weird. Like, who has a glass garage where they keep their cars? Really?
Yeah. And Cameron's bedroom, which kinda looks like a hospital room because of all of the,
It
like,
does.
pill bottles and tissues he's got all over the place, but it's, like, floor to ceiling curtains because he lives in a glass cube. That was, like, not even an '80s thing, that was a, "What the heck is this architecture?"
And I feel like on this podcast we've had great fun making fun of rich people depictions. Then you feel bad. Like I don't want to make fun of Cameron, right? Like it's
No,
like
he's clearly coming from a family with a lot of money to have that crazy amazing car and the weirdest house in the world, but, like, his parents aren't there. They're just absentee parents the
yeah,
whole time, and the way he talks about him, it's like, "This family's miserable."
right.
They're on the cusp of divorce. The dad's probably cheating on the mom. It's borderline verbally abusive to him, and who knows?
I don't know if it's as an adult, but to me, the way to grow and change is not to crash your dad's car. Cameron has that big speech at the end where he's like, "I'm going to stand up to my dad," and I'm like, "You're standing up to him because you crashed his like priceless car." It just feels a little bit weird to me, but
Yeah,
it's a little
he takes that way too easily at the end,
way too
especially since
easily.
he
Like,
spends the
oh
last,
my
like, 20 minutes
god,
of the movie pretending to be catatonic
right,
over the mileage on the car, never mind the
right.
damage to the car.
Right. And this, I think this is why I sort of liked Ferris when I was younger. It's like, Cameron does start to have fun. He's like, no, we shouldn't. But then you see him laughing
Yeah,
every
he's
time they
enjoying the
almost get
baseball
caught.
game, yeah.
Right. And he's like a fun third wheel. He's not I mean,
He's
gets
definitely
into
the
some
3rd
creepy
wheel, though.
land. But like, they're friends and like, he's having a good time. He doesn't look that third wheely. I don't know. There's still like rich boyness to him that I guess read to me a little bit different now. But
Yeah.
and there's I guess it's more of a reflection of Ferris Bueller, but there's that speech at the end for Cameron where Ferris, like it's one of when he breaks the fourth wall. I don't know if you noted this later. By the way, listeners, I didn't really read all of Amanda's timeline notes, so it's
That's
possible I'm
okay.
going out of order. But like when Ferris was like, he has this whole speech about how Ferris is going to live the rest of his life, and that with such confidence. And I think again, as a kid, I was like, he's so confident and cool. But now as an adult, I'm like, you little shit, you don't know anything. But he's basically talks about how Cameron's life is going to go, and it's almost spot on because Ferris Bueller's like, Cameron has never been in love. He's going to marry the first girl he lays. And then his wife won't respect him because you can't respect someone who kisses your ass. There's something spot on about it. And it just like highlighted all the characters. Wow, Ferris, you're going to grow up to be such a toxic asshole. And Cameron, you're a pushover and you
Yeah.
always will be. Yeah.
One thing I found super cringy and had forgotten about, so Cameron goes into this fake catatonic state, and they're dragging him around like Weekend at Bernie's for the last 20 minutes of the film,
They are.
just propping him up and putting sunglasses on him and, like, dragging him around, and you get to the very end where he's awake and he's talking again, and you suddenly have Sloane go, "Wait, if you were just faking that whole thing, were you watching me change earlier?"
Oh,
And
so
he just makes
cringe.
this, like, creepy little smile,
I
but it's
know.
presented almost like, "Oh, Cameron's reward was he got to see Sloane naked, and we're
It
all gonna be
is.
okay with that," and it's just, like, such a
Oh,
creepy, unnecessary moment. So, that part
I,
that kinda sings of these terrible '80s movies where, like, teenage nudity, "ha ha ha" kinda thing. I don't know, it just
yeah.
really left such a sour taste in my mouth after you've got this character who's evolving,
I know it felt
learning
like
to stand
weirdly
up,
out
like,
of
he's
character.
being a creep. Great. Ugh.
Right? And I feel like they played him as being not really that much of a third wheel and not pining after her or whatever. I felt like it was out of character and it was definitely cringe. And I have to say,
Yeah.
even my daughter was sort of like, ew.
Yeah.
You know?
Just icky.
Then it gets kind of laughed off but it's like not
Well,
the
even,
best.
like, Sloane has a line, "That's okay.
Right? Like
I'm
she's
not
like,
embarrassed," she says, like, it's her
which
fault. It's just
that
like, dude,
I
what?
mean, that's okay too, but it just it did not land. I kept like remaking this movie in my mind. And I think if you remade it in your mind, Cameron would probably be gay or something. I don't know.
Well,
Like,
okay, so let's talk about Sloane in the context of she's hanging out with Ferris and Cameron, because this is
yeah,
really at heart, this is a bromance. Like, it's these
that's
two
true.
guys,
It is.
they're best friends. So in some ways, she's the third wheel. She gets to ride shotgun. She's making out with Ferris all over the city, but like she doesn't really do anything.
She doesn't.
She's just tagging along. She's there for the ride. I was reading up on John Hughes before we
Yeah,
recorded this, and it sounds like she had a lot more personality in the original script, and they
yeah.
filmed it and then showed it to test audiences, and they didn't like it when she was sarcastic or complaining, so they just cut all her lines out of this movie. So now she's just pretty and she's smiling, but she's not doing anything.
I mean, that's interesting because I do think it would have made the movie better in a way. I mean, I have to say, I had forgotten entirely she existed.
Yeah, she
Um,
doesn't do anything at all. There's
yeah,
nothing to
like
remember.
nothing to remember. Like I vaguely remembered she existed, but there was nothing that jumped out. I mean, there's some funny moments that she has. Like there's that one moment where they're in a cab and they look over, Ferris looks over and his dad is in the next car over. And then, Ferris and Cameron just dive down to the floor of the cab and Sloane is there in sunglasses and she starts like creepily flirting with the dad through the window, which is weird. Cameron and Ferris were like, what's going on? What's going on? And Sloane's like, oh, he's making obscene gestures and licking the glass. And it's very funny. It's like she could go, I
Yeah,
mean,
she
even
can
as an
roll with
actress,
them.
like, yeah, she was going kind of toe to toe with the humor. And I thought, like, well, that was kind of cool. We like agency in this podcast for our
We
female characters.
do.
But
She
then that
needs
was kind
more
of
of
it.
it. She needs a
Yeah.
lot more of it.
I think if there were more of it, it would have been a better balance. There wasn't much to like or dislike. She was there.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
she's played by Mia Sara, I knew her from Legend. We'll have to do Legend at some point. That
I
movie's
don't think
so
I've
weird.
seen that. She didn't
um,
look familiar to me at all. Like, and part of it was
yeah,
like me
she
not
plays
remembering
like
that
a
she was in this movie.
unicorn princess in Legend with Tom
Okay.
Cruise.
Oh, that
And she's
sounds
in Time
terrible.
Cop. I never saw Time Cop, but I heard she was good in it. So like
I
she's
saw
a
Time
good
Cop. I don't
actress,
remember
and
that.
just they didn't use her. Especially if you think about all the other John Hughes movies that have really good parts for the girls, and I'm saying girls because
That's
they're all
true.
supposed to
They
be
do.
teenagers, but The Breakfast Club or Pretty in Pink or 16 Candles, like she's doing practically nothing in this movie.
You're right. It's kind of a missed opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, most of this movie, I feel like she doesn't need to be there at all. Like, just to have Cameron and Ferris bickering and getting in a fight and
Right. Yeah. And do
doing
like
their
the
thing.
bromance thing.
I
Yeah.
mean, it does look better in a lot of the scenes in the art museum with the three of them standing. So having three people to frame is, cooler maybe, but
Yeah.
that's the only reason I could think of her needing to be
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Didn't need to be there.
There's this random scene, and I don't know why, but as part of their fun, exciting trip to Chicago, they go to the stock exchange
Oh,
and
yeah.
they're
That was so
watching that for a
random.
while. Yeah, it's just like, why are we doing this? Capitalism, so much fun. But Ferris proposes to her, and it sounds like a joke, but then it sounds serious. And she's like, no.
Oh,
You
yeah.
cut to the end, and he's about to do the run back to his house, and he gives her the final like kiss and I love you. And as he runs off, she just looks at the camera and she's like, he's gonna marry me. And that's such a dumb ending for her. I hated that line.
Yeah. It felt like kind of unnecessary because who cares about their relation? Like, who cares? It's not a love story. Like, who
Well, and
cares?
he just went on this whole rant about how Cameron's gonna marry the first girl that he hooks up with.
It didn't even register one way or the other with me because I just didn't care that much about
Yeah.
her or their relationship that much. Like,
No.
unlike other John Hughes movies where that's like a big plot point, it just doesn't. I just didn't care.
Yeah, it felt really forced when she said that. Like,
Yeah.
okay, we need to see that they're gonna be okay. And it's like, do we care that they're okay? Not really.
Not really. Yeah,
They're fine.
they're
But
fine. I would be
he's
more excited about like Jennifer Grey and Charlie Sheen getting married.
oh my God. Yeah, they would be a much better movie. Do we want to talk about Jennifer Grey as
Yeah, let's
Amy
jump into that.
Bueller?
Jennifer Grey plays the sister, which, and I have to say, I actually wrote in my notes in all caps, totally forgot Jennifer Grey was in this movie. 100% forgot that was her. And this was before Dirty Dancing, right?
Yeah. This was
Yeah.
about 1 year before, which there's that moment where she's kicking Dean Rooney in the face, and it's like, ooh, I bet that got her cast at Dirty Dancing. Those are some high kicks when she's kicking him.
I thought she was great. So for folks who don't remember, Jennifer Grey plays Jeannie, who is the younger sister of Ferris Bueller. She just sees him for who he is. She's just like, my brother's a dick. I hate him. And he gets away with murder because guess what? He does. And then as the whole town is rallying behind Ferris because he's pretending to be sick, that I guess we like forgot to mention, there was a whole other plot point is that he's so sick that there's this whole funny save Ferris Bueller and we're really pulling for you, like as if he's on his deathbed. And she's just like rolling her eyes. My brother is full of shit. And she spends the
Yeah.
whole movie being kind of pissy about it.
So that in my memory, I remember Jennifer Grey being so funny, so bitter, so sarcastic, and it was
Yeah.
like the kind of character that I always gravitate
Yeah, yeah.
towards. I
We
love
know
my
that,
Wednesday
Wednesday.
Addams and Daria and anything Janine Garofalo did in the 80s and 90s. But watching it this time, she just came across as just so whiny and repetitive, and she's just here to whine and be like a foil. She's one of the bad guys almost, like
Yeah.
chasing Ferris around, trying to get him busted. And it sucks because, like, my memory of her was, oh, these remarks coming out of her mouth are so clever and cutting. And now I'm watching it as an
Oh, wait.
adult, and it's like, no, they're not. They're really not. She's just
Yeah.
complaining.
It didn't bother me as much. I actually still, she was sometimes a little shrill. I hate to say that as a woman about somebody, another female character, but maybe because now watching as an adult and thinking Ferris Bueller's a jerk, I was kind of like, well, she's right. You know?
Yeah. No, she was absolutely right. And she still has a couple of really funny lines. She uses the intercom to call down to the dean when he breaks into their house, and she's like, what is it? I have my father's gun in a raging case of chlamydia or something
Yes.
like
Oh my
that.
God.
And it
That
was
was
like, oh,
so
that's
funny.
still funny.
I mean, I think both my kids kind of looked up and were like, what's that? And of course, my wife's like, why do you keep watching these movies where we have to explain things that we're not ready to explain to our kids?
Yeah.
I think my daughter sort of realized that that was like sexual somehow, but didn't really know why. I don't know. I thought that was funny too. For folks who don't remember, the principal is trying to bust Ferris Bueller,
I mean, she has gotta
and
be
yeah, she's
the
defending him.
onset for Home Alone. Like,
Right?
right down into, like, Ruby
Yeah.
breaks into their house, she goes and hides under the bed at one point because she's scared, which is, like, the dumbest thing you could do if there's an intruder in the house. Get out of the house, don't hide under the bed, but,
Yeah,
like,
it's
she's
it's
defending the
definitely
house.
echoes of Home Alone were all over that. As the principal is trying to basically break into the house to catch Ferris Bueller faking sickness, Jennifer Grey's character is there defending the
Also
house.
trying to
Yeah,
catch Ferris Bueller faking sickness, but now she has to
they
defend
should
the
have
house.
teamed up. Oh my God, I would have
Oh,
watched.
glad they didn't.
I feel like I wrote this in the notes, but I was like, if I would watch a remake where actually the sister character and the principal character get along and team up to just show the world what a jerk Ferris Bueller is, like I would watch that movie.
The thing though, I do love at the end where she kind of does a 180 and joins Ferris's side, gives
Yeah.
him an alibi, lets him into the house when he's about to get busted, and just takes Rooney's wallet and
Yeah.
throws it to the Rottweiler with that look on her face. I mean, it's the total redemption for her character. She comes out looking better probably than anyone else in this movie.
I think she does too. And I didn't mind her 180. I thought it was fine. Why does she end up at the police station? Can you remind me?
She gets arrested because they think she made a prank call to 911 because nobody believes her
Oh,
that
that's
there was a
right.
home invader.
Right.
So they arrest
That
her
like creepy
instead.
principals out there, like, And then she meets Charlie Sheen, who's there. Who, by
Which
the way, I like completely forgot he had a cameo in this.
there's supposedly a whole backstory for that character, and they just like cut the whole thing, but he's
He's
fascinating. The two of them together is so good.
so good. And it's sort of a precursor. I don't know if you've seen Major League, but he looks like his character in Major League,
Oh, he
Charlie
does a
Sheen.
little, yeah.
I know he's a hot mess in real life, but he's pretty funny in this, as in the
Well,
cameo.
just knowing that he's a hot mess now, the fact
I
that
know.
he's sitting there on the bench and just turns to her and goes, "Drugs?" That more than lives up. That's like
Totally
even
lives
better.
up.
That aged so perfectly.
Perfectly. And he plays the perfect drug addict. And yeah, so basically they start talking and she thinks he's gross, and it fast forward and she basically starts making out with him and turns into a flirty mess, which sort of annoyed me. But
Yeah, her exit from the police station where she's tripping over herself because she's so smitten. That's not in character, and it was really annoying.
yeah.
But I still like the two of them together. It was
I did too.
it was funny.
I thought they were kind of funny. And her mom shows up at the police station. And like the whole thing is that Jennifer Grey's character is trying to like bust her brother, and her brother's the jerk, and her mom shows up at the police station. It's like, oh my God, my daughter got arrested and now she's making out with a drug addict. What the hell is going on?
And I lost the Vermont deal.
And I lost it, whatever the
Whatever
fuck
that
that means.
is.
But I still think if you did remade this movie today, she would be the hero, kind of.
Yeah, she's an interesting character, and she does have an evolution. She's a different person at the end than she was at the
Right.
beginning, unlike Ferris.
Unlike Ferris. And I was like rewriting the movie in my mind. Okay, she would be the hero and she would show the world what a dick her brother is, and she would still get the guy at the end or whatever. Like, that's probably what would happen.
Totally different movie.
Totally different. The one funny thing I also thought, nothing to do with her as a character. She's at the police station. When she even calls 911, they're like, wait, are you related to Ferris Bueller? Is he okay? We're pulling for him. She gets so mad that everybody is falling for, the whole like save Ferris thing. They even have a save Ferris's on the water tower. It's funny. And it struck me as kind of funny because it's one of those things that quote unquote go viral, but in 1986. This is how things go viral in 1986, I guess.
You spray paint things on the water tower. Viral meme, 1986. It's on the water tower.
Yeah. So
But then that's what makes Charlie Sheen kind of, even though he's a drug addict, comes in very philosophically and just turns to her and says, why do you care?
Right.
And I think a light bulb goes off for her at that moment. Why do I care? Why?
Right.
Like, I just cut school to chase him down. I'm doing the exact same thing he is.
Yeah. No, that was a good moment. There's another movie in there that I want someone to make and make the sister the hero. Yeah.
With Charlie Sheen as her boyfriend.
Totally. But I guess you'd have to have he's like, what, 1,000,000 years old now? I'm like,
oh, they all are. God, if you start looking at the ages of the cast now, it's just like, oh no. They're all like their 70s.
Well, let's go back and talk about the principal, Ed Rooney.
Oh God. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about this before. We should be separating the actor from the character. You've heard me during the Indiana Jones episode talk about this, but this Dean of Students, Ed Rooney, is played by Jeffrey Jones.
Yeah, wait, what did he do? Because I don't know.
Registered sex offender, Jeffrey Jones.
Not.
He's a pedophile.
Get out.
After this movie, I think in 2002, he gets busted for child pornography and like
oh my God,
soliciting an underage kid, and is guilty and serves his time, but he's supposed to be registered as a sex offender and he keeps failing to do it and getting rearrested. But at the same time, he ends up getting hired on Deadwood, and then they made a movie and he didn't register, and then they had kids on set and all the parents got upset like, oh my God, why would you hire a pedophile? But anyway, we're taking this into a dark place that we don't need to be. I had
no idea.
Jeffrey Jones, ew.
Jeffrey Jones, ew. Yeah. Okay.
Like,
totally.
They had no idea when they were casting him.
Yeah.
This wouldn't come out till years later, so like can't fault the movie for that, but there's stuff, this character is very creepy, and just knowing what the actor has done just adds this layer of extra cringe to it. That scene where he goes into the arcade and thinks he's about to bust Ferris Bueller and says to that teenage girl, but he's like, your ass is mine. And she turns around and it's just so gross coming out of someone like that.
The actor being a pedophile aside, I mean, that was also a moment where I think my daughter looks at me, and because it's just so foreign, I think, to kids these days that an adult would say that about another kid or treat another kid that way, that it's just, I just don't think it's depicted in movies and film like that at all anymore. And it is
should it be.
Nor should it be.
Inappropriate.
It's totally not appropriate. It totally is not, I think, how kids today think of their principals or their teachers even.
No, I mean,
they're
there
not
shouldn't
supposed
be
to
any
like
sexual language coming from the staff of your school directed at the kids. Like,
and if there is, boys and girls, get the fuck out of there.
Tell an adult.
Yeah.
Not that adult. Tell a different adult. Tell a parent. Like, get out of there.
The thing is, like, I didn't hate him in the movie. I didn't. I feel like, you know what? Ferris is a little shit. You go get him, Ed Rooney.
He is, but you're taking Ed Rooney's side. You have gotten old.
No, but then, on the other hand, he poisoned the dog. He didn't
poison the dog. He hit the dog over the head with the flowers.
But still.
Yeah, you don't hurt a dog.
You don't hurt a dog.
There was no indication that there was a dog until the moment.
For some reason, this
Just came
keeps
out of
coming up
nowhere.
in these podcasts where there's a scene with someone hurting a dog, and we're like,
Don't
oh
hurt the
no,
dog. Yeah. Now you're a bad guy.
now you're a bad guy.
No, I think he's funny in this role and appropriately funny. I mean, this is basically he turns this whole situation into like a Roadrunner cartoon where he's just chasing Ferris all
Yeah.
over town. And the whole thing too, that Ferris has no idea. Like Ferris is oblivious to the fact that this dean has left the school, is driving around town trying to find him.
He's essentially like the Joe Pesci character from Home Alone, trying to like
Yeah, he's
ineptly.
weirdly breaking into the house and getting hurt and losing his shoe. And yeah, it's absolutely a Home Alone style break-in.
I mean, like in a
Also,
weird, like the slapstick stuff did sort of resonate with my kids. They thought it was funny, probably because they've seen and they like Home Alone and just like
yeah,
thought it was funny. I can't say that I was rooting for him, but I wasn't not rooting for him.
I I like the scene with him, and he's got his secretary Grace, played by Edie
Loved her.
McClure. Oh, she's
He's
so
so good.
she's one of those people who appears in so many of the movies from our childhoods. She's hilarious, and she just has that distinct voice that's
Yeah.
so like sing-songy and like sounds like an idiot, but she's a very good actress. The first shot of her, you just see her with this giant, it's not quite a beehive, but like really puffy 80s hair.
Like a
She
football
just
helmet.
she just starts pulling pencils out of it, and she gets up to at least 4 pencils, like, "Oh, I guess I put those in there," and apparently she just did that on her own. That wasn't in the script. Sh She's just like, "Oh, you gave me crazy hair. Watch what I'm gonna do with it." I was reading that she and Jeffrey Jones, for that scene where they're taking multiple phone calls from landlines and figuring out,
Right.
like,
Oh
"Oh, wait,
God.
whose
Cores
parents are
everywhere.
calling?" They just ad-libbed that whole thing. That
That's kind of
all of
fun.
that, they just told the 2 of them to just go crazy and let them run around in circles around the desk and out of the office and into the office, and that they just had the camera going with them, and it is very funny. Like, the looks on their faces, they think they've made, like, major offense to a parent who's grieving a loss and just scrambling, and it's such a farce in that scene, but they do a really nice job with it. So yeah, compliments for those characters being, like, as funny as they are, especially since when that was all filmed, it wasn't supposed to be a comedy.
Oh, that is funny. I kept also thinking if email existed, it would have saved him.
Yeah. I like at the end too, over the credits, after he's been trying to break in the house, he's been bit by a dog, he's had his car towed, he's like lost a shoe, he's just looking really ragged, and the school bus pulls up next to him. And he has to do this walk of shame down the aisle of the school bus.
Yeah.
And they just hold that shot, and the whole thing is just so uncomfortable, but it really like, I haven't been on a school bus probably since, I used to work at a summer camp back when I was 20 years old. That was probably my last time, but I just that feeling of walking down the aisle when there, like, isn't a seat available and everyone's just kinda staring at you, but nobody's moving, and it's just so awkward. That
Yeah. It was
came
definitely purposely awkward.
viscerally back. I was just like, "Oh, I hate that feeling of walking down the school bus aisle trying to find a seat." Oh,
That part was good. I felt like a little bit bad for him. Sorry, I
uh,
did. I mean, I guess it's sort of creepy that he's trying to break into a teenager's house. Total creep. Just disliked Ferris more.
even
Yeah,
as
no,
an
totally.
adult, I'm just like, I can't sympathize with the adult who's trying to, like, discipline a kid. Like,
Yeah, I guess like at
he's
the end of
just
the day,
ugh.
I'm on the side of the sister at the end
Yeah,
of the
I
day.
think Jeannie's the winner here.
She's the winner. I think that's where if you're gonna reboot this, Hollywood, that's where you need to start. Yeah, so throughout this, there's like a lot of iconic scenes, I'd
Yeah.
say.
So, one of the most iconic things in this movie is Ben Stein, who was
Yeah.
not an actor up until this moment.
Was he
He
not? Oh, that's
he was
funny.
Nixon's speechwriter. He is a
No, he
very
wasn't.
yes, he was.
Oh my
And
God.
yeah, they were like looking for someone who just seemed really boring, and somehow somebody knew someone and was like, "Oh, you got to check out this Ben Stein guy." And they originally were just going to use his voice and not show him at all, but then he
Oh, they gotta show
between
him.
takes was actually started lecturing all the extras that were sitting there about voodoo economics, and they were like, "Hold up. We're doing this for real." And just let him actually just say whatever he thought about economics, and
Oh my
that's where
God,
that
I had no
whole scene
idea.
came from. He just ad-libbed the whole thing. And then
Oh my God.
apparently got a big applause at the end from the crew, and he thought, "Wow, like, I really taught them something about economics." And they're like, "No, you were so boring. That was perfect."
I had no idea. That's so good. Because
Yeah,
it's
no.
classic. And even during that scene, that's when my daughter was like, "Oh, I understand now why Ferris wants to cut school." That is so funny. I've learned something today, Amanda. You've taught me something.
Yeah,
I had
that,
no idea. Oh my
you
God.
never know which actor may have been a Richard Nixon speechwriter.
And like I feel like his performance as the boring teacher essentially is probably what drove it into the Library of Congress kind of thing. Like
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
his pronunciation of Bueller,
right? I mean,
like,
this is like he's literally the voice of a generation here.
yeah, he represents all adults in this movie's sphere.
Yes, he does. And oh, that's funny. I mean, I didn't even remember that Charlie Sheen was in this. I didn't remember that Jennifer Grey was the sister, but I remember Ben Stein.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
I didn't even remember that Sloane was a character, but I
Right,
remember
but you
Ben
remember
Stein.
Ben
Yeah,
Stein,
of
and that
course.
scene is only well, it felt like it went on forever, but that was probably only like a 2-minute scene,
Yeah, no, it's definitely iconic. There's the whole parade scene. I mean, that's sort
which
of
turns out, because in my head, that's what Chicago is. Like, every time I go to Chicago, I'm expecting a parade. But
and you're expecting Matthew Broderick to be like leading people
yeah,
like
like,
song.
where's Shake It Up Baby? Guys. But actually, so it turns out, because this was a fairly low budget movie, like that parade actually is a thing or was a thing at the time, and they just lined it up to be shooting on that day. So some of the people who were like dancing, the construction workers, those aren't actors. Those are just
Get out of
people
here. Those are
who
just like
were
that's funny.
watching a parade from afar. So I
Yeah.
thought that was really cool. I mean, the parade's definitely the highlight of their big trip out. Like, so much silliness going on there.
It's just definitely still an iconic scene that to me still lands, I
Yeah.
think.
No,
Yeah.
that part, that's fun.
The whole montage is fun. I mean, they fit like a week's worth of things in what, 3 hours? I don't
Yeah.
know.
I love the art museum.
Yeah.
They don't have any dialogue that whole time. You just see them wandering around the museum, they're playing with the kids, and they're making out in front of the Chagall windows there, and,
Yeah.
like, but it's just so kinda charming and thoughtful, and a real pause on some of the other hijinks that are going on in this movie, so I thought
Yeah.
that part was really nice.
Yeah. And the rest of it, the shticks are thing, they're still kind of funny. Like him almost getting caught places, and then the race back, and then of course the second they drop off the car at the garage that that those garage attendants are gonna take off with the car.
There's a scene with the garage attendants that it's just this random cutaway, and you see a landscape, you hear the Superman theme music, and then you just see the tires of the car come flying over the camera.
Yeah,
That to
it's
me
kind of
is
fun.
the funniest moment in this movie. Like, that's always made me laugh, just
Yeah.
how epic it is when the 2 attendants have stolen the car and are free driving around the state of
Yeah.
Illinois in it. Oh, so funny.
It is funny. It's still lands. It's still iconic. I mean, like I feel like those montagey type scenes are still good. Um, even if Ferris is a jerk, these things are still kind of fun. And then the whole race back so he doesn't get caught is still kind of fun,
That
I
part's
guess.
always a little bit silly to me. Everything's all exciting, but then Cameron has this freak out and everything gets thoughtful and philosophical and kind of depressing almost. And then all of a sudden we have this silly foot race versus the car to get back to the house in time. At that point, I just am not up for any more hijinks. I'm just like, just end this movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, he's not
Yeah.
going to learn any lessons here. Like, just get home, get back in the bed, whatever.
Yeah, I think that some of the more modern stuff about the movie are like Cameron really just sort of
Yeah.
like talking about his depression essentially.
Yeah.
I
I
know
mean, if you
doesn't I know that's not what the movie's about, and I don't think it was meant to be viewed that way, but in some ways I sort of liked those parts.
it's not comedic at all, but yeah, that's the part that has a bit of soul, I think.
Yeah, to me it just highlights that Ferris is not a good character. But
Wait, to circle back on the foot race
yeah.
poem scene, so Ferris this entire day has been just doing whatever he wants and like, okay, we talked Cameron out of it, we put a car through a window, whoops, and he's running through the backyards, but in his head, the only stakes here are his dad comes home from work at 6 o'clock. And that's what his dad told him right at the beginning. Like,
Right.
he doesn't know that the entire town thinks he's dying in the hospital.
Right.
He doesn't know that Dean Rooney is after him. He doesn't know his sister's after him. I mean, he makes eye contact with her and they're racing, but the stakes are, oh, my dad would be a little bit disappointed if he knew I left the house when I was
Yeah,
pretending to be sick.
yeah.
Like, that's
It's like
so
weird
low
stakes.
stakes.
Comparatively to crashing a Ferrari.
Yeah.
It's kind of low. Yeah. And then he gets away with it. Then at the end, I think he also then repeats the line about the iconic line, like, if you don't, wait, what's the line again?
Life
Yeah.
moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
I mean, that's going to make me sound like a fucking dinosaur. But, you know, watching this movie now 30 years later, knowing this is like 1986, it's already passed, right? At this point, it's still 30. I mean, is it even more than 30? Yeah, 30 plus
Yeah.
years later.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, yeah, life did go fast. It's still
Did
resonant.
any of us stop and look around?
Right.
No.
Did
No, we
anyone
didn't.
stop and look around? Exactly. I think if you're watching this as a teenager, you kind of have the perspective of like you have your whole life ahead of you, and then you're watching now as a middle-aged person, this asshole is telling you this, and you're like, I guess he's kind of right.
I think we optimistically as kids were like, yeah, I'm not going to be that kind of adult who rushes through everything and doesn't stop and look around, but like
and does business.
and
Yeah.
we do business. That Vermont deal is very
Yeah.
important. I think the lessons you get out of a movie like The Breakfast Club kind of express that more accurately. I feel like this is a very high platitude coming out of Ferris Bueller.
It's funny. I keep going back to, like you said, it was in like the Library of Congress. I mean, we're giving away the game here, what we think, but I think there's better versions. I think there's better John Hughes movies with better characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In my mind, The Breakfast Club is the better of the two.
Totally agree. Although I haven't seen that in a long time. And I feel like I'm going to watch
That
that now and we're going to get back here and we're going to be like, oh my God, so-and-so's
so many
Yeah.
cringy things about The Breakfast Club, which,
Oh,
yeah.
Maybe we should watch that next. Anyway,
No, we can't do two John Hughes movies in
that's
a row.
true. Got to spread them up. But yeah.
We can't do Emilio Estevez and Charlie Sheen back to back.
Oh my
in
God, that's
reviews.
hilarious.
That would be too much. Too much
Yeah,
Estevez.
good.
So do we want to talk about other things that made us cringe? We've got Cameron with his peep show.
Yeah, that was probably the height of cringe for me. But I should also just have to say, dear listeners, I still like movies with cringe, and that's okay. But you know, there's been a bunch of it in this one. But yeah, what else is cringe?
I think we both noticed that scene where Ferris goes to pick Sloan up from the high school and they just start making out in front of the principal or in front of Dean Rooney there.
Yeah.
And he has that line. He goes, so that's how it is in their family. Like,
Right,
it's just
so weird.
ugh.
And just so if folks don't remember this specifically, it's like because Sloan is getting out of school because Cameron pretends to be her dad and calls the school that like
From the
Sloane's-
landline.
Yeah. So Sloane's grandmother passed away. So basically the whole thing is that the principal thinks that it's Sloane's dad picking her up. And then they make out because it's Ferris Bueller. And it's a little gross, I think.
Yeah. But like that line is basically implying there's an incestual family.
Right.
But the fact that his response to it was just like, oh yeah, like that's the way the father and daughter kiss in that family. Like,
Ew.
like
Yeah,
once
that was
again,
so
principal
weird.
or dean being so inappropriate. Yeah. So that line, definitely cringy. Well, closing thoughts.
I feel like my closing thought, if we have a closing thought, is like, why is this movie loved so much? I mean,
Yeah.
that makes me sound like a jerk saying that. But
No,
like,
but this was a listener recommended request, and
sorry, Amy, whether she liked it, I don't know. I always think like the best ones to re-review. Amy, it was a good choice because it's the ones that you kind of hold in your nostalgia, but haven't seen it in so long that when you revisit it, it's totally different. And I feel like this one, I think more than any of the ones we've watched, felt like I had a totally different perspective on it as an adult.
Yeah.
I know we're like skipping all over the place, and I know we still need to score it, but that is my question.
I think people were attracted to the kind of freewheeling, hey, I can skip out on my responsibilities story that's presented here. And then also the little bits of philosophy that he's dishing out every time he looks at the camera. In our memories, that seemed really profound. But now rewatching it as an adult, I'm like, oh, he sounds pretty douchey in a lot of these moments.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
maybe the same way I used to think Axl Rose was really spinning out some, like, deep thoughts that when I re-listen as an adult, it's like, "No, we got just
He's
a bunch
probably
of
drunk,
20-year-olds just running their mouths, and
pretty
it's
much.
not as cool as we thought it was when we were younger than Ferris Bueller. Once we passed him in age, it just doesn't seem as cool anymore."
I think that's totally right. Once we passed him in age, he's not the cool guy that I thought he
Yeah.
was in a
'Cause,
way.
like, think back to your high school, like, there was probably a cool kid or a couple of cool kids who were seniors when you were a freshman. You see them walking down the hall, and
Oh yeah,
it was just like, "Oh, here he comes, he's so cool," and, like, yeah, he was probably a total idiot. Teachers probably all hated him, and that
yeah,
is just
yeah.
a different viewpoint we're seeing it as.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that. And maybe it's because also I feel like we were on the younger side when this one came out. So I was younger and then probably rewatched it as a tween. I think that's what I thought a teenager would be like, I guess. I don't know.
That's what we thought the level of stupidity with the adults was gonna be, and now we are those stupid adults,
We
and
are those stupid adults, but you know what? We have email, we have cell phones. So I don't know.
yeah, we can catch those kids before they leave the school.
I know, pretty much. Any closing thoughts from you before we get to scoring?
Oh, I feel like I've been on a lifetime roller coaster, in my opinion, with this movie. It's a tough one, and I don't think I would watch it again, frankly.
Let's get to the scoring then. 1 to 10, 1 being garbage, 10 being Princess Bride. The first score we do is for our perspective as adults, and the second one will be for kids today. But what's your adult score?
I think I'm gonna go 4. I
Yeah.
didn't enjoy watching this again.
I also gave it a 4. I didn't go super low because I thought, well, there's still some fun elements. He just wasn't as cool as I remember him being. But
Yeah. Oh.
so our second score now is how would this live up to the intended audience today? And same rating, 1 to 10. I think the intended audience is clearly teenagers.
Yeah, I think when I watched it at 8 years old, I was too young. I wouldn't
Yeah.
even understand why does he need to take a break?
What do you think for teenagers today? What do you think? Or kids?
Even though your kids are not the age that would have been the target audience here, I think
Yeah.
they're a little too young too. But I think they're picking up on things like Ferris kind of is a bully to
Yeah, he
Cameron, and
kind of
like
is.
that's
Yeah.
not great. And I think just their sensibilities today wouldn't find some
Yeah.
of the things funny that were supposed to be funny in this movie,
Yeah.
which makes me think this gets a low rating for the target audience as well. My kid rating or teen rating, I think I'm gonna go 4 on that too.
Or yeah, I mean, I went back and forth between a 4 and even as low as a 2 for all the same
Ooh.
reasons. Because also the reliance on the landlines, that was a tough one. It's a tough one for kids to get over. They have no fucking idea
Yeah.
like what that is. But I did ask my daughter what she would rate it because I thought I needed some help. So she rated it a 4, even though she
Okay.
told me she didn't like it. She's like, yeah, I didn't really like it. I was like, what'd you like about it? She's basically like, nothing. I mean, I think part of it is that I mean, I was a little bit leading the witness, but I think part of it is that aside from the idea of skipping school, which will give it a few points for, I think that's possibly why she said 4 and not like a 0, right? Still some things that resonate, just the idea of skipping school and like that, like having a good time. But other than that, there's really not a lot to hold on to. And I kind of agree with her number. She's 11, so it's not quite the target. It's still, there's just not enough there. There's cringe stuff. There's stuff that they don't understand, like landline. Like I
Yeah.
just, so that's like 4s across the board. So it's like a 16. That
That's
has
a
to be pretty
16.
low.
That's our lowest score ever, just
Oh,
barely beating out Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer,
get out.
which had a 16.5 because
Oh
you
God.
gave a 3.5 on your kid ranking on that one.
I did. Oh my god. Oh my god. Well, I mean, I can't believe that a movie that's in like the Library of Congress. Fuck the
Yeah,
Library of
it's
Congress.
culturally significant,
They,
but it doesn't make it good.
they should listen to this podcast.
I mean, I got to imagine like Birth of a Nation is also in the Library of Congress and nobody should be watching.
True. Well, I mean, I think we know the answer to this, but Amanda, the basics here is that we both have to agree whether this lives up for this podcast to deem it living up. So, what say you, Amanda?
God,
Do I even
no.
need to
No,
ask?
no,
No,
no. It
no,
doesn't
I
live
agree.
up.
It does not live up. A unanimous thumbs
Yeah.
down. Well,
Oh, it's one of those moments where we have fond memories of something that you can't go home again. You can't go
yeah, it
back
just
and
has
see
to
it.
stay. It's a period piece. So, dear listeners, please let us know if you agree, disagree, especially Amy, please. We're at Live Up Pod on all the socials and at Live Up Pod at Gmail. I am because I feel like if folks are maybe slightly older than us or maybe just grew up watching this, maybe go watch it again before you kind of like
Only
hate
if
on
you
us.
want to. If you're
Yeah.
Ferris curious, go
If you're
check it
very
out.
curious, I guess it's sort of worth a watch just to. Oh no, it's not. Don't do it, and
If
don't
you
show it to
have
your
good
kids
memories
either.
of this movie, just keep them. Just
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 keep
save
them.
it. Just
Save it in
preserve
the
it in your
past.
mind.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody. Till next time.
Thank you.